The night he said it didn't feel like a fight. It felt like a truth that had been waiting too long to escape. We were sitting at the dining table, half-eaten dinner between us, when the words slipped out between his sighs. "You were never my first choice, Leah. You were just my backup plan." At first, I thought I'd misheard him. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence until it sounded like a scream. Then he looked up from his plate, his face blank, like he hadn't just cracked my world open. My mouth went dry. "You mean that?" I whispered. He didn't flinch. "I'm just being honest." That was worse than anger. Worse than shouting. Honesty meant he'd thought about it, believed it, accepted it. I stared at the man I'd built a life with, the same man I'd defended, cooked for, believed in, and all I could think was how small I felt sitting across from him. He picked up his phone. Dinner was over. So was something else. I didn't cry that night. Not because I was strong, but because the shock was louder than grief. I went through the motions. Washed the dishes. Wiped the table. Tucked away leftovers neither of us would eat. He sat on the couch, scrolling through his phone like we were strangers who'd shared a meal out of obligation. When I finally walked past him, he didn't look up. "Good night," I said quietly. He nodded without meeting my eyes. In our bedroom, I stood before the mirror, staring at the faint reflection of a woman I barely recognized. For years, I'd been his comfort. His calm. His constant. Now I realized I'd only been his convenience. Sleep didn't come easy. My mind kept replaying the word backup, like I was an old file he'd kept in case something better didn't work out. At 2 a.m., I heard him laughing softly, texting, maybe. And something inside me, something small but solid, whispered, "Remember this moment." Because one day, it would be the reason I finally walked away. The next morning, sunlight hit his side of the bed. Empty. He was already gone, his coffee mug on the counter, half drunk, beside a phone charger he'd left plugged in. Routine. Cold. Predictable. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding my breath like it might steady me. My phone buzzed. A message from him. "I'll be late tonight. Don't wait up." The same message he sent the nights he said he was meeting clients. I used to believe that. I used to believe everything. Now, when I scrolled through social media, I saw glimpses of the truth he never thought I'd notice. Photos from parties I wasn't invited to, smiles I didn't recognize, the same woman's name appearing again and again in comments. Her. Always her. The one he swore was just a friend from work. The one he always seemed to be around when he worked late. My chest tightened. Backup plan. He hadn't just meant the words, he was already living them. That evening, I made dinner anyway. Old habits die harder than love. I set the table for two, even though I knew he wouldn't come home early. I waited until the food went cold, then finally sat down and ate alone. Every bite tasted like something ending. I thought about our wedding day, how his hand had trembled when he slid the ring on my finger. I'd mistaken that for love. Maybe it was hesitation. At 9:47 p.m., the door opened. He smelled like perfume that wasn't mine. My heart sank, but my voice stayed steady. "Rough day?" He hesitated, surprised I was still awake. "Yeah. Long meeting." I nodded slowly, staring at the faint lipstick stain on his collar. I didn't call him out. Not yet. Instead, I said softly, "You look tired." He gave me a half smile. "You always worry too much." He kissed my forehead, a mechanical, hollow gesture, and walked past me. That night, I decided to stop worrying about him. And start paying attention. I began noticing things. The extra shirt in his car. The hotel charge on our joint card. The sudden care with which he dressed for work meetings. He wasn't even hiding it well anymore. Maybe he thought I wouldn't notice. Or maybe he didn't care if I did. At work, I held myself together. Smiled when people asked how we were doing. At night, I watched him drift further away, body present, soul gone. One evening, as he showered, his phone lit up on the nightstand. A message preview flashed. "Miss you already." My stomach turned. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Instead, I walked to the bathroom door, leaned against the frame, and said quietly, "Who is she?" The shower stopped. A pause. Then, through the curtain, his voice, calm, almost bored. "You don't want to know." But I already did. And that was the moment I decided, if I was only his backup, it was time to let him see what life without me really looked like. The next morning, I woke before him. His arm was draped lazily across my waist, as if habit alone could hold us together. For years, that touch had meant safety. Now it just felt like a chain. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft rhythm of his breathing. He looked peaceful, maybe because lies were lighter to carry when someone else bore the truth. When he finally stirred, I pretended to be asleep. He dressed quietly, checked his phone, and left without a word. As the door clicked shut, I exhaled. Then I got up, opened my laptop, and typed into the search bar, "Divorce attorney near me." I didn't call, not yet. I wasn't ready to make it official. But I needed to see the name. To feel that the option existed. That night, when he came home smiling faintly at his screen, I smiled too. He didn't notice the difference, that my smile was a shield now, not a welcome. I had stopped asking where he went. Because soon, he'd realize I was no longer there when he came back. The first thing I took back was my money. Quietly. Methodically. I went to the bank and opened a personal account. The teller smiled, unaware she was witnessing a small rebellion. I moved half my savings, the ones I'd earned, not shared. When I got home, he was on a call. I slipped past him like a shadow, unseen, unheard. That night, he ordered takeout for himself. Didn't ask if I wanted any. I ate leftovers alone and wrote in my journal, "He is building a life without me. I'm just returning the favor." I started staying late at work. Colleagues thought I was ambitious. Really, I was just avoiding the cold silence that waited at home. Every night, he grew more careless, whispers in the hallway, texts at dinner, new cologne I hadn't bought. I documented everything. Dates. Receipts. Names. Not out of vengeance, but clarity. Because one day, when he accused me of being dramatic, I'd have proof I wasn't imagining the slow death of our marriage. He wanted freedom. He just hadn't realized yet, I was about to give it to him. 3 weeks passed before he noticed the change. I stopped cooking his favorite meals. Stopped asking when he'd be home. Stopped waiting up. He'd walk through the door to find the lights dimmed, the house quiet, me already in bed with a book. Once, he stood in the doorway, watching me. "You're different lately," he said. "Just tired," I replied without looking up. He nodded, but I could see confusion flicker in his eyes. He'd expected confrontation. Instead, he got distance. And that scared him more than shouting ever could. One night, I came home late from work, hair still damp from the rain. He was sitting on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Where were you?" he asked casually. "Out," I said. "With who?" "Does it matter?" The silence that followed was thick, the same silence he used to weaponize against me. But this time, I didn't feel it. I just walked past him, towel in hand, my heart beating steady. He had wanted a backup plan. Now, he was watching it walk away, one quiet step at a time. The first real test came on a Saturday. He'd planned a work trip. I already knew where, and with whom. While he packed, humming, I sat on the edge of the bed, sipping coffee. "Where are you staying?" I asked lightly. He froze, then forced a smile. "Just a client retreat. Don't wait up." I nodded, pretending to believe him. But when the door shut behind him, I exhaled the longest breath I'd held in months. I waited an hour, then opened my laptop. The tracking app synced perfectly. His phone location blinked from across town, a hotel. Same one from the receipts I'd saved. Proof. I closed the laptop and let the tears finally come, not because I was surprised, but because now it was undeniable. Then I wiped my face, opened a new email, and wrote to the attorney whose name I'd bookmarked weeks earlier. "I'd like to schedule a consultation. My name is Leah Bennett." When I hit send, something shifted inside me. Not anger. Not revenge. Relief. He was free to live his lies. And I was free to end them. By the time he returned, I had changed things. Small things. The framed wedding photo in the hallway, gone. His favorite mug, moved. The drawer where he kept his keys, empty. He walked in, dropped his bag, and frowned. "Did you clean up?" "Just needed space," I said, echoing the same words he once used when he disappeared for days. He didn't catch it. Or maybe he did, but didn't want to admit it. He tried to act normal, making small talk about the trip. I nodded, uninterested. When he leaned in to kiss my cheek, I turned slightly. It landed on air. That night, I lay awake beside him, staring at the ceiling. His breathing was steady, peaceful. Mine wasn't. I thought about all the nights I'd waited for him, believing love was about patience. Now I knew better. Love wasn't waiting. It was seeing clearly and choosing not to stay blind. I closed my eyes, feeling the quiet hum of freedom begin to take root. He didn't know it yet, but he'd already lost me. The lawyer's office was smaller than I expected. Warm light, neat shelves, the faint scent of coffee. The woman behind the desk smiled. "I'm Evelyn," she said. "Tell me what's going on." Her calm voice almost undid me. I told her everything, the backup plan, the lies, the hotel, the late nights, the other woman. She listened quietly, taking notes. When I finished, she folded her hands. "Legally, he's already breached the marriage," she said. Emotionally, he left long before he packed a bag. Her words sank deep. "What do you want to do?" she asked. I hesitated. "I want peace," I said finally. She nodded. "Then we'll get you that." By the time I left her office, papers in hand, the sky had begun to rain. But it didn't feel like sadness. It felt like cleansing. Driving home, I realized I wasn't scared anymore. I was planning. For the first time, my future didn't depend on his promises, only on my decisions. When I parked, I sat for a moment, listening to the rain on the windshield. It sounded like applause, soft, steady, and mine. I started moving through the house like a ghost. Polite. Present. Distant. He noticed. One night, as I folded laundry, he leaned against the doorframe. "You're quiet lately," he said. "I've been thinking," I replied. "About what?" "About what life would look like without this." He frowned. "Without what?" "Without pretending," I said simply. His jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. He'd grown too used to me forgiving him before he even apologized. But this wasn't forgiveness anymore. It was goodbye, unfolding slowly enough for him to watch. The next morning, he tried being kind, made coffee, complimented my dress, sent a text midday, "Miss you." I didn't reply. That night, he asked, "Are we okay?" And I said, "I think you know the answer." He stared at me, confusion and fear flickering across his face, two emotions he hadn't shown in months. He didn't realize it yet, but he was starting to feel the same emptiness he'd left me in. And that was justice, in its quietest form. A week later, I began packing. Not in boxes, not yet. In my mind. I made lists. Documents to copy. Accounts to close. Things that were mine and mine alone. I started taking small things to my sister's house, a few books, an old photo album, a jewelry box my mother gave me. He never noticed. He was too busy chasing someone else's attention to realize he was losing mine completely. One night, he came home early. I was sitting by the window, a half-finished cup of tea beside me. He placed his hand on my shoulder. "Leah, we should talk," he said softly. I looked up, meeting his eyes for the first time in weeks. "About what?" "Us," he said. "Things feel off." I held his gaze. "Things are off. You just didn't care until you felt it too." He exhaled slowly, like the truth was heavy. Then he said the words that sealed it. "I never meant to hurt you." I smiled faintly. "You just didn't mean to get caught." After that night, something shifted between us. He tried harder, flowers, dinners, late-night talks that felt rehearsed. But I'd seen too much. You can't unsee the absence of love. He begged for normalcy, for another chance. But it was too late. I had already built my exit, silently, piece by piece. One afternoon, while he was at work, I met with Evelyn again. She slid a document across the table. "Separation filing," she said. "Once you sign, it's official." My hand trembled only slightly as I signed my name. Each letter felt like reclaiming oxygen. That evening, when he came home, I greeted him as usual. We ate dinner in silence. Then I said, softly but clearly, "You were right, you know." He looked up, confused. "Right about what?" "About me being your backup plan," I said. "Because now, I'm moving on. And you'll finally have space to find your first choice." He stared at me, eyes wide, mouth open, words lost. I stood, cleared the plates, and left him with silence, the same silence he once gave me. He didn't take it well. At first, disbelief. Then anger. "Are you serious?" he shouted. "You're throwing everything away because of one mistake?" "One?" I said quietly. "You built an entire life on them." He paced the kitchen like a trapped animal. "Leah, you can't just walk out." I met his eyes. "I already did. You just didn't notice." He tried every tactic, guilt, charm, tears that didn't quite reach his eyes. But nothing could undo the moment he'd told me I was his backup. When he finally realized I meant it, he sat down, defeated. "Is there someone else?" he asked bitterly. I almost laughed. "Yes. Me." That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. Because freedom, I learned, isn't loud. It's quiet. Steady. Unapologetic. The next morning, I left early for work. When I came home, his car was gone. And in its place, peace. For the first few days, he didn't call. I thought maybe he understood. But guilt has a strange way of sounding like love when it's too late. By the end of the week, my phone began to ring. First once. Then again. Then 20 times. "Leah, please. I just need to talk. We can fix this. Don't throw us away." I didn't reply. Each message felt like a ghost of the man I used to know, haunting, hollow, desperate. Instead, I focused on small things, watering plants, cooking for one, letting music fill the house again. The air felt different, lighter. At night, I journaled, not about him, but about me. About what I wanted to build once the dust settled. Freedom wasn't loud or wild. It was stillness. Space. Breath. By the 5th day, his messages changed tone. You'll regret this. You think you can do better than me? I didn't answer that either. Because I already was. He showed up a week later. No warning, just his car pulling into the driveway like it used to. I opened the door before he could knock. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, hair unkempt. I just want to talk, he said. About what? I asked. About us. About how we fix this. I stepped aside slightly, but not to let him in. Us doesn't exist anymore. He stared at me, searching my face for softness. There was none left to find. I made mistakes, he said. I know that. But we can start over. I shook my head. You didn't just make mistakes. You built a life where I didn't matter. And now you're shocked that I stopped staying in it. His eyes watered. Maybe real tears, maybe not. Leah, please. I can't lose you. You already did, I said quietly. You just didn't notice when it happened. He looked at me for a long time, then turned and walked away. I didn't cry. I just closed the door, softly, finally, completely. The weeks that followed were strange. Quiet. Free. A little lonely, but beautifully so. I rearranged the living room. Bought new sheets. Painted the walls a warm beige, softer than the sharp gray he'd chosen. Every corner began to feel like mine. At work, people noticed the difference. You seem lighter, one colleague said. I smiled. I am. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about rediscovery. I'd spent so long orbiting his moods that I'd forgotten what my own felt like. Now, I laughed without fear that it was too loud. Cooked whatever I wanted. Went for evening walks just because I could. Sometimes, loneliness would creep in, that ache of familiarity you miss even when it hurt you. But then I'd remind myself, peace isn't the absence of company. It's the presence of self. And I had found that again. One evening, my sister called. You've been quiet, she said. I'm fine, I replied. And for once, it was true. She came over that weekend, bringing wine and laughter. We sat on the couch, talking about old memories, the good ones, before life got tangled. You're different, she said finally. I'm myself, I said simply. Later that night, after she left, I found myself thinking about the version of me who once begged for scraps of love. I wanted to hug her. To tell her she was enough all along. My phone buzzed then, his name flashing on the screen. I watched it ring until it stopped. No more answering to the man who couldn't value me. No more giving explanations for peace I'd earned. I turned the phone off and went outside. The sky was wide and full of stars. And for the first time, I looked up without wondering if he was under the same one. A month passed before I heard from him again. This time, it was a message. I made a mistake. She's gone. I miss you. I read it twice, then deleted it. Because that's how it always was, he only remembered my worth when someone else stopped applauding him. He'd thought I was his backup plan. Now he was living without a plan at all. Meanwhile, I had begun to build something real, a life that didn't depend on his moods, his choices, or his validation. I took a trip by myself to the coast one weekend. Walked barefoot on the sand. Watched the waves roll in and out. The air was cold and clean, the kind that hurt your lungs a little but reminded you that you were alive. As I stood there, wind in my hair, I realized. I didn't hate him anymore. I just didn't need him. And that, I knew, was the truest kind of freedom. He showed up again, 3 months later. It was early evening, the sky was turning gold. I was watering the plants when I saw his car pull up the street. I didn't panic. I didn't rush to the door. I just kept watering. When I finally opened it, he stood there holding flowers, tired ones, wilting at the edges. "I wanted to see you," he said. "I'm sorry." For a moment, I said nothing. Then I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. He looked smaller than I remembered, like the months had stripped away his confidence. "I lost everything," he said quietly. "The job. The apartment. Her." I nodded. "And now you've come for the one thing you thought would always wait." His mouth tightened. "Can we start over?" I looked at him, really looked, and saw not the man I'd loved, but the lesson he'd taught me. "No," I said softly. "But I hope you start over for yourself." He swallowed hard, nodded, and turned away. The car door closed. I didn't watch him drive off. I'd already left long before he arrived. That night, I made tea and sat by the window. The house was silent, but not lonely. Every inch of it carried my energy now, no traces of his chaos, no echoes of apology. I opened my journal and wrote. He came back, but I was already gone. It wasn't victory I felt, not the kind people imagine. It was peace, quiet and steady. The kind that doesn't demand to be noticed. I thought about how love used to mean sacrificing parts of myself to keep him whole. Now I understood that real love, the kind that lasts, begins with self-respect. He'd called me his backup plan. But I'd become my own foundation. When I closed the journal, I smiled, not out of pride, but out of gratitude. Because some heartbreaks don't destroy you. They clear the space where you finally learn to grow. Outside, the moonlight hit the windowpane just right, casting silver shadows on the floor. It looked like peace had come home and decided to stay. Life moved quietly forward. Work got busier. Weekends became lighter, filled with books, laughter, and long walks through the park. One afternoon, a coworker invited me to a local art fair. For the first time in a long time, I said yes. I spent hours wandering through paintings and handmade jewelry, sipping coffee that tasted like freedom. No heavy thoughts, no lingering sadness, just presence. That's when a stranger asked to sit beside me on a bench. We talked about the art, about travel, about small things that didn't demand answers. When he laughed, it wasn't to impress me. It was genuine. When I got home that evening, I didn't rush to tell anyone. It wasn't about moving on, it was about feeling ready to live again. Sometimes healing doesn't look like fireworks. Sometimes it's a quiet afternoon, a shared smile, a moment where you realize your heart no longer hurts to touch. I didn't know where life would go next. But for once, I wasn't afraid to find out. Months later, I visited the coastal town again, the same place I'd stood months before, barefoot and broken. This time, I came with peace instead of pain. The waves crashed softly, the horizon stretched wide, and the wind felt kinder. I walked along the same stretch of sand, remembering everything that had once made me small. And realizing none of it could touch me anymore. I stopped where the tide met my feet and whispered a quiet goodbye, not to him, but to the version of me that had accepted so little for so long. The ocean didn't answer, but it didn't need to. It simply kept moving, just like I had. When I turned to leave, the sun was setting, painting everything gold. It looked like closure. Like the universe was saying, "See? You made it." And I had. Not perfectly. Not easily. But wholly. A year later, I woke up to sunlight streaming through my window. My plants had grown tall. My laughter came easily now. My peace, once fragile, had roots. Sometimes I still thought of him, not with anger, but with distance. He had been a chapter. Not the book. I made coffee, sat on my balcony, and watched the city hum awake. No noise in my chest, no ache in my heart. Just calm. People often ask how you know when you've healed. I think it's when you stop needing closure, because the silence finally feels full instead of empty. I didn't need to prove he was wrong anymore. I just needed to keep living like I was right to leave. As I sipped my coffee, I whispered to the morning light. You were never a backup, Leah. You were the plan all along. And somewhere deep inside, I knew. He finally got to see what life without me looked like. And I finally got to see what freedom truly felt like. Sometimes love doesn't fail, it finishes its lesson. And the lesson is simple. Never let anyone treat you like a placeholder in your own story.